Okay. I guess that we had a very fruitful technical question. I've seen many excited chats in the coffee break. It means that something was alight. So I guess you had a very rich discussion. I guess that since we are a few minutes behind schedule, before moving to the closing plenary, it is time to hear what happened during the breakout sessions. So, for this session, it is foreseen to have, in a few minutes, a presentation by the rapporteurs of the three sessions. So, the three sessions for the different breakout sessions are, of course, Munir Gribi from OGS and Emuni, Aravella Zaccariu, which has many titles, including being the chair of the Mediterranean Committee of Education for Sustainable Development, and Domenico De Martinis, the scientific attaché at the Italian Embassy in Cairo. I will go in order, so if it's fine for you, I will give perhaps the floor to Professor Gribi. You have 5-7 minutes. If you want, the floor is yours.
Okay, so thank you very much, Giuseppe, and very pleased to be here to share with you our thoughts. First of all, I really thought that it will be an easy task, but it was not. So I was trying to do my best to collect all the information and put them together in a few minutes. So I apologize also with my colleagues who participated with me in the same session if I forgot some of the things that maybe could be raised up here. So I will start, first of all, with one point, which is the bullet point, I think, to break the ice. And according to what I have, let's say, collect and share with my colleagues, we arrived to this point. Research infrastructures, both hard and soft infrastructures, are institutional lighthouses to bring scientists across borders to ensure excellence and bring them together and bring the North and South together. Ultimate goal is to open the doors of all research infrastructures to those who can best use them for the welfare of the whole region. And this is exactly links and summarizing somehow the recommendations that I will go through right now, okay? So I will send you this if you agree. Okay, thank you very much. So the recommendations, as you understood, let's say the session, also thanks to the moderator, Dr. Hiba, we try to get from our speakers some of the thoughts. First of all, the state of the art, and then the challenges, and then the recommendations. I mix everything together, and we come out with these, let's say, recommendations. Through science diplomacy, and also, in this case, through the international cooperation, we have made significant achievements in the field of research infrastructures, both hard and soft. Notably, we have achieved significant physical infrastructure, exemplified by the synchrotron light, for example, and the synchrotron light experimental science and application in the Middle East, the CESAM, the ICTP, the International Center for Theoretical Physics, and many other infrastructure and institutions that have been contributing to the success of science and scientific research in the Mediterranean area. The important role also of ITER, a project where several countries work together as a good example for science diplomacy to create the next generation of electricity through fusion facility and make available the electricity at a global level. This is also another example. Why I'm saying this? Because often, as you said, Giuseppe, I'm also a professor at the University of Trieste and I'm director of a master. Often we have we forget to link the academia, which means research and university, to the productive sector. And we knew that the productive sector, in many cases, they influence, and here the word influencer, also the governance, which means the political will. So it is very good that I have been lucky to have ITER, for example, in this, our session, because we understood through their involvement that they are making something which is service and goods for the global use, which means for the welfare of the community. Beyond these tangible accomplishments, we have also established vital and virtual infrastructure, especially in the field of high-performance computing. These also have been raised up through the intervention also from our colleagues, particularly from Fabrizio, and I am very thankful for him. However, amongst these achievements, we face considerable challenges, including the lack of long-term strategy to support research and innovation, a widening gap with developing countries. For example, in southern Mediterranean, in particular in the Arab countries, we are more a user of the technology rather than the provider of the technology, maybe because also of the less national infrastructure, and this is that has been raised up by colleagues, the colleague from Palestine. The concerning loss of human capital, we have seen that sometimes we attract many of those talents from the south, but then we lose them on the way. I'm sorry to say that, because today, for example, we have been also trying to understand that what we are investing in people, which means the brain drain that become, of course, the capital drain, we need also to ensure that these people, they will be, they come back to their, let's say, home countries. So the concerning loss of human capital, brain drain and capital drain, and the pressing need to ensure sustainability in terms of financial, technical, technological, and expertise resources. Unfortunately, the region, and I will not teach you this, you know better than me, it's very instability, as you know very well, the political instability, and often some of things change on the way. So we have a lot of plans, a lot of good strategies, but they remain always a short-term strategy where just change in the political and at national level makes things change. And this is what we are trying to transmit, which means that to ensure the sustainability in long term. To address the challenges in the Euro-Mediterranean region, several crucial actions are imperative. And now I will give you our thoughts as a recommendation. Collaborative efforts between North and South countries must be fostered to bridge the gap and stimulate progress. Prioritizing data and capacity building along with skills development, circulation of talents is essential. Governance and the commitments to a long-term roadmap for science collaborations are indispensable, making research infrastructure attractive to attract, of course, and retain talents, moving away from an ad hoc project, often also with the enthusiasm. Some of the countries, particularly in the southern countries, with the financial support, they start immediately a project that sometimes we lose it in the way before we start it, or sometimes it lasts before it finished. I don't know how to explain it. So it's not the question of financial support. We need, of course, to have a plan, a strategy of how to make it more successful and sustainable. So, for example, we can link the international, to international treaty and consortiums such as the European research infrastructure when you build your own infrastructure at national level. You can create instruments and provide incentives like financial instruments to attract own scientists living abroad and or new talents. To encourage the installation of some national infrastructure in the south. It's an important point that has been raised up. Coordinate programs to valorize existing infrastructure and ensure good implementation of research and development strategy. Finally, it is crucial to create a comprehensive mapping of existing opportunities and infrastructure to address common challenges with a collaborative and coordinated approach. We also recommend advancing open data and open science, as well as freedom of mobility. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was a very rich presentation, and also it's my pleasure to note that many points connect with the UFM Research and Innovation roadmaps. So thank you again. I would like now to give the floor to the next rapporteur, which is Dr. Aravella Zacariu. So Aravella, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Giuseppe. I will make something like a humor from the instrumental and more technical part of research infrastructures. Our session discussed the issue from the aspect of philosophy and spirit. So in our session, we had to discuss the issues of mobility and training. And it was really very honored for me reporting this session, to report on this session, because it was a great group of scientists and young people that they were very inspired to the discussions that took place during the session. The moderator of the session was Emiliano, which is next to me, but also please allow me to mention the colleagues. Was Sohai Luca, Marca Gual Soler, sorry for the accent, Maroum El Mujaber, and Mar Filat. Our session elaborates the essence of training and, in more general view, the role of education in science, diplomacy, as well as the mobility, and more concretely discuss issues like what competences needed, what type of trainings we need. So the discussion reflects on 5 questions. The first question related with the training, and if the training can be the answer for promoting diplomacy. 2 critical questions arise from this discussion. First, clarify what training means, and means to accelerate the mechanism and capacity building frameworks with the need to establish procedure that will bring people and all the stakeholders to be aware of what sustainable diplomacy is. And diplomatic academies mentioned as an example. And the second question was what sustainable diplomacy means. So it's very important, after all these complexities in our region, to reconsider what sustainable diplomacy can be, and also identify the criteria that could be useful for developing training courses for sustainable diplomacy in Med region. It's also interesting that some examples of programs like Marie Curie program or science programs for Catalonia Foundation were used as good examples for identifying such criteria. These training programs, it's very important to be open programs, bringing people together based on issues of common interest, being interdisciplinary and bringing science together. It also is very important in these programs, training programs, not just to include as a context the complex terms, but also these programs must be interactive, promote mutual understanding, joint respect. So in this process, we have to see the training and educational programs as communities of learning for science diplomacy. The second question emphasizes on decisive competences for science diplomacy that we consider that could have. So, very interesting competences identified. The first competence related with the anticipation, which relates a term that is newly established in this, with the essence that was explained, has to predict the future in order to see where the science is going and prepare accordingly. And not just to wait to react after what is happening. The second competence has to do with the sustainable brokering, and this has the honest brokering, and the honest not only between sciences, but only between countries. And the third one is multiculturalism. It is really interesting because in this discussion, emerge again something that means that is going back to basic, but is really important to be part of this training program, the history, geography, and language of our region. And another important competence is the sense of community that should permeate these programs, to bring people together and develop the sense of belonging, responsibility, willingness to contribute for the common good, the common objectives, and of course to be programs that will recall, acknowledge, and celebrate scientific ethics. The third question related with discussed issues about the mobility and how important is mobility. So, since a lot of discussion was about the multicultural and cross-cultural competences, mobility is a prerequisite to rethink issues in a different perspective. Mobility helps us to get to the shoes of others and to develop a sense of belonging to one world with differences, but this world at the end of the day is our home. Help us this to create a common identity and empathy, and Erasmus programs mentioned as a good example of reference. Also about the importance of mobility, another important point that was addressed is that mobility can help to develop a message of a deliberation, of autonomy, of freedom, of these values that cannot be taught but only experienced and can achieve by mobility. A Euromed conference for young scientists was also a good example that was mentioned. The third question was related with perceived specificities for developing training for sustainable diplomacy in Mediterranean region. Very interesting points discussed related with the importance of establishing a curricula which will be focused on the geopolitical context and problems of the Med region. But also some other questions emerged through this. How we can define these key elements for sustainable diplomacy curriculum, what is needed to integrate such a curricula, to put a framework for implementation that will put things in a practical way and not be generic. Also, this curricula is very critical to put at the center the human rights and duties, and also to take in consideration the common values, experiences, and challenges that we are facing in our neighborhood, which is the Mediterranean, And this training should be tailored to the needs of the Mediterranean, but also flexible and adaptable to our national context. Finally, the fifth question addressed the issue of what is expected from the stakeholders from science diplomacy. So one critical point was the evaluation. It's very important to see the impact of these trainings, to have tangible training programs with clear goals. Also, what are the credentials of these trainings and how these trainings can be applied practically. The need for quality training programs was also was addressed, and the need to be connected with the labor market, to be aware of sustainable diplomacy jobs, and the trainees to be able to respond. Also, another issue that discussed in this was the role of the trainers. To have competent trainees, you have to have competent trainers to know what they are doing, for what purpose, and why. The recommendation and our proposal is in the framework of education as a whole. And we have to address that education is the key for science diplomacy, but education that will lead to human rights and duties. And for this reason, we need training institutions that will not be instrumental, but will operate as communities of learning for science diplomacy. And this needs a holistic view and has to do not only with training programs, curricula, scholarship, but has to do with the ethos of the institutions. This means to be oriented to the osmosis of all the sciences, to have a mission, vision, tasks, cultivation of values, providing the needed resources, and be open in the society. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This has been not only detailed, but you've given us a lot of homework to do, apparently. So thank you. And last but not least, as they say, I'd like to give the floor to the last rapporteur, Domenico De Martinis, a seasoned expert in cooperation and research and scientific attaché. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So our group was Science Advice from Foreign Policy. The discussion on science diplomacy put out from this discussion emerges some aspect that you may have heard already. The need to bring together society, policy, and science for the discussion. The need to promote an approach of research, dialogue, and advice to have policy, to make policy decision. And also the importance of human capital. Those are things that you may have heard of also when you are talking about a national policy. But sometimes the challenges that we are facing and the approach that we want to have are not bound to a single state. Sometimes the dialogue is a different level. It could be local, could be regional, it could be international. So in this science diplomacy, in our opinion, becomes functional to promote a collective intelligence. I will use just the word that have been used during the meeting. So collective intelligence to create a common shelter of values. This could be the way that science diplomacy could make a difference in the dialogue between science and policy. Our take-home message is our advice is to go towards an institutionalization of a collective intelligence. So a scientific advisory mechanism between scientists, policymakers, and diplomats to address the challenges that we are facing. How to do that? I would like to go back to the human capital. Maybe the science diplomats professionals, this kind of hybrids that we are meeting today, for example, could be a solution for the future. At the end, we are in the Mediterranean Sea. We need sailors able to navigate through the Mediterranean science and understand the message of the lighthouses that give us that they are very technical. And so this could be the solution, or, well, not the solution, one of the tools to go towards the solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. And before concluding, I'd also like to propose an applause for all the moderators and the rapporteurs that have managed these sessions today. You've done a great job. This leads to the closing plenary session, which I'm going to hand immediately the word to the moderator, which is going to be managed by Itaf Ben Abdallah, who is not only the Senior Advisor on Higher Education Research in the Union for the Mediterranean, but also a diplomat, so the best person placed to manage the session. The floor is yours.
Thank you, dear Giuseppe. Thank you. Firstly, on behalf of the UFM Secretary General, I want to welcome Ms. Maria Cristina Russo, Director for International Cooperation and the Global Approach, DG Research and Innovation, European Commission, for being with us today. Thank you for being with us, Ms. Russo. For this session, it will be the closing session, as Giuseppe said, and I think no need to repeat ourselves by defining science diplomacy and the reality of science diplomacy nowadays. We will try to look to the future of the concept. We will try to be optimistic, to propose together concrete actions for the future of science diplomacy in our Mediterranean region. But why we are asking about the future of science diplomacy? As we noticed today, the science diplomacy is a fluid concept that depends on social, economic environment in which diplomacy is conducted that make us a little bit scared about what can be science diplomacy in the future. You know that the reality, we will be frank to say that science nationalism gains momentum. Science is mainly viewed as national asset and less as a global public good. See more protectionism, crisis of multilateralism in our region and on the world in general, the increase of security in the international agenda. For that, we will put some questions on the table. Do you think that science diplomacy will survive to all the challenges that our region is facing? Which actors do you think will be most relevant in the future of science diplomacy? Because the practice of science diplomacy is changing. Unlike some years ago, it now involves new actors and new subjects. These changes have necessarily created new ways of interaction between governments, private sector, academia, science community, all have a need to work together. I will, for example, as example, more than 50 countries have been developing their representation in the Bay Area, either via traditional consulates in San Francisco or via new types of representation, such as the Swiss Next Hub. The presence in the Bay Area is important for understanding what is coming next and for attracting investment, technology companies, but this presence can't be possible for all the region, for all our countries. And this leads me to another question: in which fields science diplomacy will evolve for the future? And finally, what will be the role of international organization, regional organization, such as the Union for the Mediterranean in the future of science diplomacy? A lot of questions, but how to respond to these questions? we will not use a magic ball, but we have eminent panelists that I am honored today that will help us to reflect together, panelists from different countries of our region with different backgrounds, working directly or indirectly on science diplomacy. I will try to present our panelists, but please, if I forget something, you can add this after that. We have Mrs. Najat Aoun Saliba. Mrs. Najat Aoun Saliba is currently a member of the parliament of the Lebanese government. She is also an adjunct professor in chemistry at the American University of Beirut. As a scholar activist, Mrs. Saliba engages in community-led environmental projects that are based on the co-production of knowledge for finding the most suited local solution. We have Mr. Patrick Nedelec, délégué aux affaires européennes et internationales. As a scientist with an international background, Dr. Patrick Nedelec has been working in the field of research administration for nearly 20 years. During all these years, he has acquired and strengthened his skills to best serve the interests of French scientists at the European and international level, and also, I will add, the interest of all our region. We have with us Mrs. Alessandra Tonio-Nato, an Italian diplomat currently serving as the head of science diplomacy and bilateral scientific cooperation at the Italian Ministry for Foreign Affairs in Rome. She served as Consul of Italy in Buenos Aires and Deputy Head of Political Office in Berlin. After returning in Italy, she is the Deputy Head of No Proliferation and Disarmament Office. We are honored to have also with us Mrs. Lourdes Miranda Garcia. Ambassador Garcia is the desk officer for science diplomacy at AFID. Ambassador is a career diplomat for 27 years at the headquarters of the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation. He has worked in foreign affairs at the Directorate General for Consular Affairs and has been Deputy Assistant Director General for North Africa. In the multilateral field, she has been assigned to the Directorate General for Foreign Policy in the Sub-Director General for Foreign Policy of the European Union. She has also been posted at the Spanish Embassy in Norway, Spanish Embassy in Ghana, Egypt, as second head cultural and scientific counselor at the Spanish Embassy in Portugal, as well as Spanish ambassador to Mali. And we have Professor Wael Benjalloun. Dr. Wael Benjalloun is the currently emeritus professor at Mohammed V University in Rabat and honorary president of the Union of the Mediterranean University, UNIMED. She has previously held the position of president of Mohammed V University, dean of its Faculty of Science, president of the Moroccan Conference of University President, and founding academic vice president of Al-Akhawain University. Last but not least, Mrs. Max Pauli is the program manager, the World Academy of Sciences. Mr. Max Pauli is doing all things that I didn't understand, I can't understand. He worked in the area of protein structure and molecular recognition for almost 20 years. His research work took him from New York, UK, to laboratories in New Zealand and the US, including the Harvard Medical School, with academic position in Australia and in the UK. He is an eminent scientist, what I can say. The question, I will summarize my question to my eminent panelists. First question is the future. You think that science diplomacy will survive? With which actors? In which fields, and the role of organizations like UFM. Please, Mrs. Saliba, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. This has been an enriching experience with me today, the first time I attend a science diplomacy workshop or discussion. But let me, or allow me to say that there is science for life when life is fair, and there is science for life when life is not fair. And if you allow me, I will be talking about the importance of science diplomacy when life is not fair, in conflict and disaster zones. And these zones have multiplied in the last few years. And I can talk about Ukraine, Sudan, Karabakh, Syria, Palestine, Lebanon, Libya, Morocco, Turkey, just to name few. And in this first question, I will be raising more questions and leave the solutions to the second round. So the first question I have in mind is, can science diplomacy serve the most vulnerable and provide solutions to the impoverished and displaced population, extending beyond humanitarian assistance? And if so, what are the resources that we need to develop responses to crises and disasters like earthquakes, flooding, forest fires, pandemics, and others? How can we harness the human capitals between NGOs, universities, diplomats, and how can we develop networks and computer capability to develop and to deliver solutions with high efficiency, avoid duplication, and minimize spending? Another question, how can we leverage humanitarian aids to predict new disasters? Because usually when there is a need for humanitarian aids, that means people are lacking the infrastructure that will allow them to make plans for preventing new disaster. In the end, allow me to say we need to acknowledge that science has also a major role to play in those times of disaster, and it is crucial to work together. And I will end on a positive note, because during the time of COVID, there was a full issue on nature, talking about how the scientific community came together to find a solution for the pandemic. I think if we pull ourselves all together, we can find solutions to the disasters we're experiencing now. One thing we need to keep in mind is that we always have to balance between a bottom-up, community-driven approach and a top-down approach, because diplomats also care about their image and pressure works. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Saliba. Your intervention shows us that our needs are different, but finally we need to work together despite these differences of objective and needs. I give the floor to Mr. Patrick Nedelec to respond to our questions.
Thank you very much, Ita. Thank you very much for the invitation for this conference on science diplomacy in the Euro-Mediterranean region, and especially on this closing session on the future and perspectives. So it's a high challenge for us to bring all these good ideas that came out from this different session and to see, is there any future for science diplomacy? I think that's what we have said this morning and this afternoon, is that science diplomacy is well adapted to respond to global challenges. These global challenges, such as the COVID breakthrough, the climate change, sustainable energy issue, these global challenges actually have three things in common. The first one is that they have scientific dimension. Clearly, it's scientific dimension talking about climate change or COVID outbreak. It has also another very important issue, which is the cross-national boundaries. And finally, this global issue, as we also are completely convinced, is that there is no country that could solve by itself this issue. It means that we have to work together. These are the common background of these global challenges. And actually, looking at the Euro-Mediterranean region, it is a natural places to setting this development of science diplomacy, because this region is a vibrant region for cultures and knowledge exchange from millennia. And these exchange and culture has created the foundation for shared identities and also common understanding. If we want now to go further on that issue of identities and shared and common understanding, we need also to bring values and principles to share all together to go further on that dimension. And that was exactly what we tried to promote during the French presidency with the Marseille conference, where we organized in this old city that represents actually more than 25 centuries of exchange, cultural exchange, migration exchange. And we have these cities that represent this mixed knowledge and culture. And we wanted to have within this city this discussion on the EU global approach as Christina is promoting on a daily basis. And during this conference, we actually succeeded to have what we call the Marseille Declaration. The Marseille Declaration is the decision on the 27 members of the EU to convince and to a consensus on 10 principles and values that we should share to promote international cooperation in the future. The next step is what actually Christina is leading, which is the multilateral dialogue on these principles and values, not only at EU level, but now with all the different countries that have specific association with EU. I think it's more than 43, 50 countries. And now this multilateral dialogue will try to give rise a new framework or new documents where we could have reference, common values and principles to develop international cooperation on research and innovation. And this is exactly why the ministerial conference of the Union for the Mediterranean on 22 has also made a declaration putting a reference on value and principle, which is very essential for the future of the area, and has made actually quite clear that science diplomacy has to be a strategic objectives. This is, well, actually it was mentioned this morning on that. And that's why we think that the UFM is the ideal forum to have diplomats, scientists, civil society to bring together this issue of common science diplomacy issue. And to answer your question, Itaf, and I will finish on this first question, on the actors that we could rely on for science and diplomacy. Of course, we could think about the ministries, Ministry for Foreign Affairs, Ministry for Research, Ministry of Research and Innovation, academics, civil society. I think we mentioned that in a session where I was participating just before, not forgetting the private also companies, because we have to have science diplomacy evolve in a world where we do have also economic diplomacy, and we have to make sure that economic diplomacy or talking with scientific diplomacy. And sometimes we need to adapt these two. So we have to work right from the beginning, economic and scientific issue. There is a lot of programs that also help the scientists to develop specific cooperation within the Euro-Mediterranean region. France has some, but I know most of our colleagues we do have also. I would like just to mention one actually specific actors which I think is quite emblematic. is the Pasteur Network research laboratories that are developing in Tunisia, in Morocco, in Algeria, that are independent body working hand in hand with the Pasteur Institute in Paris to tackle global health issue for the commons of our citizens. So I will finish on that. I see good future for science diplomacy, and UFM a fantastic platform to develop that all together. Thank you very much.
Thank you for these words, and thank you for trusting on UFM, and also for sharing French experience on science diplomacy. I give now the floor to Mrs. Alessandra Tonianoto, Head of Science Diplomacy from the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And thank you very much for this extremely inspiring day. I learned a lot. And this was, for me, a revealing opportunity to make contacts, but also to focus on some aspects of science diplomacy that I'd never considered before. This is the reason why I will not take the speech I prepared at home, but I will talk about other issues that were inspired by your very useful contributions. First of all, I would like to tell you how did I choose to work in this field. I've been a career diplomat for 22 years. I was coming back after my last assignment to Berlin, and I could choose among several fields to work on at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I chose science diplomacy because I saw this is an expanding and more and more necessary domain. From the Italian point of view, we are expanding all our instruments, financial instruments, the network of scientific attachés by Italian consulates and embassies abroad, because we believe in that, and we are not the only ones. So I chose the job because I believe in it, and I'm very glad to have opportunities to exchange and to learn a lot from you. I completely share what Patrick Nedelec said about the role of the Union for the Mediterranean. I think this is a fruitful forum to have different stakeholders meet and share ideas. And I think it's important that science diplomacy focuses on global challenges, what Nejat Al-Sariba mentioned, but even more important is to focus now on the very urgent regional challenges, because we all look at the Mediterranean as our living space and living opportunity, and we have to take the responsibilities and the challenges, but also the opportunities that are offered by this amazing and unique region we have the chance to live in. And we have the responsibility to take good care and make the most of it in order to leave a positive heritage for the future generations. As Octavio Quintana mentioned this morning, we have obstacles in front of us. One is competition, one is bureaucracy. And this is the reason why I believe that science diplomacy should be diplomacy, but a lot of science. First of all, not to end up in the constraints of bureaucracy. Science has to push forward and to send alerts on the emergencies, because we have the instruments. Every country has important skills, and if we put them together, we can certainly foresee big major events bound to climate change that can engender enormous humanitarian disasters, and we can mitigate those extreme events thanks to the most advanced techniques that we all individually have as countries, but we have to put them together. And we are quite good at it if we listen to what CISAM project is doing. So this is an amazing example of how different countries can cooperate positively even when the political situation gets tense, but science is doing better. The Abdus Salam Center is another positive example. So this gives us hope that we can really put our resources together for a better impact. Concrete actions. I think we've yeah? Okay. Then second round.
Thank you, because we will let the concrete action for the second round of yeah, thank you. Thank you. I don't know if the moderator has the right to give, also to share his idea or not, because I don't agree about bureaucracy in diplomacy, and that we need more scientists than diplomats. For that, I will call Ambassador Lourdes to give us her opinion about that. Please, Ambassador.
Sorry, I didn't say we need more scientists than diplomats. I said we need more science.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much to the UFM for organizing this, this interesting conference on science diplomacy, which is a topic which is gaining momentum. And thank you, Ita, for moderating this panel. I will start first with the actors. There are many actors, in fact. We have first the public sector, which is unavoidable. In the domestic front, not only public officials in the ministries, but also policymakers at large, including parliamentarians, and also public specialized research and innovation foundations, institutes, and many different actors. Of course, abroad, we have the embassies and career diplomats, and not only career diplomats, because embassies are a large umbrella, embracing representatives from sectorial ministries. We have to bear that in mind, trade and cultural attaches and other representatives. Of course, researchers, communities, academia, universities, societies, different associations. We have such a large panoplia of actors, in which we think that, of course, we have to bring in the private sector for the reasons that other speakers brought to the table. Science diplomacy is not only about bringing science advice, scientific advice to diplomacy. There are other dimensions that we cannot forget: economic, social, security, and geopolitical in general. So all the big challenge, I think, is how we can work all these actors together, how to structure dialogues in a better way. On the domestic field, obviously, we can think of some mechanism, structured mechanism to better work together. First, to get to know better and for mutual understanding, and to establish work dynamics which can be mutually enriching. On the domestic front, obviously, specific science advising bodies. We have that in Spain within our Ministry of Research and Innovation. We have a council set up for several years now, which is embracing and is composed of, from the private sector, Confederation of Entrepreneurs, to civil society, to scientists themselves. Is a broader representation. And abroad, of course, we think that the embassies can play a very important role, as to mobilize what could be described as the quadruple helix. we encourage them to become really active drivers in mobilizing this engine of science diplomacy because, as I said before, they comprise public officials, academia, industry, private companies abroad, civil society at large. And the goal is to identify synergies, create innovative alliances among all stakeholders to amplify outreach and impact of science diplomacy. As far as strategies, that with regard to actors, as far as strategies and priorities, well, we have our Director General at the opening ceremony already explained our EU presidency priorities, which we think can be a good foundation to shape a framework of science diplomacy in the Mediterranean, because we share most of the objectives. That is, establish open strategic autonomy, and of course to continue working on climate change and green and digital transitions, without forgetting fostering territorial cohesion, which is very important. And one issue which is a priority for Spain, which is gender mainstreaming in research and innovation for a more equitable and prosperous future for all. So the big challenge is to bring all different stakeholders, communities, and breaking down silos. And we talked all throughout these sessions on two key strategies. That is diplomacy for science. We can do diplomacy for science, which is, of course, giving visibility to the excellence of science, and of course advancing collaborative synergies. But of course also bringing scientific knowledge, to the decision makers, and for that to establish effective channels for this exchange. But I would also have a word, if you allow me, if I have the time, just one brief, yes?
20 minutes to start our session because we lost it.
So if I'd like to summarize, we think that the structuring axis of advancing science diplomacy in the Mediterranean has coordination. Yeah, it could be. Yeah, we can leave that for the second question. Okay. I would like to bring to the attention and to one issue, is the intersection between science and culture. Several speakers around the table brought this topic, which I think is highly important. In the 21st century, we think that culture and science cannot go separately. And so they have to be integrated, and this is particularly pertinent in the Mediterranean basin, where we share common values and identities. This integration serves multiple vital purposes, like preservation of cultural heritage, because science plays a pivotal role in preserving our cultural heritage, and also supporting economic growth through cultural tourism. Accessibility and outreach. By incorporating cultural perspective into scientific research, complex concepts become more understandable to the broader audience, the general public. The putting together science and culture can also stimulate creativity and innovation. It can also provoke and identify in the interdisciplinary research and new discoveries. Cultural perspectives help ensure also that science is conducted ethically and responsibly. And of course, it fosters inclusivity and diversity. By integrating cultural perspectives, we can foster a richer and more representative scientific workforce. So, in summary, get a more inclusive, innovative, and ethically grounded scientific landscape. And I'll leave it at that, and we can go to concrete actions.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador. Thank you. I think now that we need another vision to respond to our question and to reflect. And for that, I call Professor Wael Benjelloun to share with us his reflection about our future. Yeah, please, Professor.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. This is a very rare occasion where researchers and diplomats can sit together and discuss issues of common interest. So thank you to the Union for the Mediterranean for this opportunity. I come from UNIMED. Essentially, today I represent UNIMED, and UNIMED is the Union of Mediterranean Universities. Today it represents about 160 universities, and the entire activity of UNIMED is based on diplomacy, science diplomacy. Now let me just, between parentheses, say that science diplomacy, to my mind, is not necessarily science and diplomats. It's science and decision makers. Those decision makers may be diplomats, or they may be responsible for activities in other sectors of social activity, of social life. So what the UNIMED has done is it's brought 160 universities together that have advocated with organizations such as the Union for the Mediterranean, such as the European Union, to bring to these organizations the collective thinking or the collective ideas of its member universities, and to serve in the other direction, to bring to the universities explanations of decision taken at a higher level. What can a union like this do? I'm thinking in terms of the the climate change meetings, for example, in 2015 Paris, in 2016 Marrakesh, and the last one in Sharm el-Sheikh, where universities were extremely active and extremely productive in terms of the decisions that were adopted at these meetings based on lobbying by universities. Now, in Marrakesh, where I was intimately involved, there were 70 universities present in both activities that were related to the meeting themselves and in parallel activities at the time. There were 18 science academies present. There were the conferences of university presidents from Morocco, of course, but also from France, from Spain, from Portugal, with universities also present from Amman. So these are universities that came together on a common platform. Science diplomacy, as we're talking about it today, is an effective means of dealing with the major problems, as has been said, that face society today. But it's also, and I want many people have talked about the major problems of climate change, the nexus, and so forth. I want to also talk about science diplomacy at a national level, at a lower level. And I think there it's extremely important. And anyone here who has served on a conference of university presidents, for example, can tell you that these conferences, although consultative, they have no power, have been extremely effective in transmitting and in suggesting policies that assist and that help and that contribute to sustainability in development. The elephant in the room today are the students. Is that somehow we have to find a place in meetings like this where the people most concerned by what's going to happen tomorrow can be present and can contribute to the discussion. And some of them have a lot to say. UNIMED has just organized the second Mediterranean Student Leaders Conference, and it was in Fez, in Tangiers, in Morocco last week. I've been traveling a lot. I don't know where I've been in the last few weeks or so. The first one was held in Barcelona. And these conferences are real, veritable learning experiences because the youth have their own vision of tomorrow. And we have to find a formula to get that into our deliberations. So when you tell me what's going to happen tomorrow, who is going to contribute tomorrow, yes, all of us are going, not all of us, some of us may not, but in future, the decision makers based on data-based decisions, so I don't say science-based. Science brings up issues of culture and so forth. Data is a much more neutral term to my mind. It's data that's there, you use it or you don't. So data-based decision-making, the scientists need to be there, the decision-makers need to be there, but the other generation, the youth, also need to be there so that we're making decisions that are real decisions for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. And because... Thank you. We didn't finish yet. Okay. Now, because as Professor said, we need also to hear scientists. For that, I will ask Professor Max Pauli to give us his opinion about all what we shared. Please.
Yeah. Thank you for giving the World Academy of Sciences the opportunity to share the experience on the science diplomacy. I prepared a presentation, a very brief one, if it can be shared. So the World Academy of Sciences is a program unit of UNESCO. It's supported primarily by the Italian government, to a lesser extent by the governments of Sweden, Germany, and Brazil. I would like to go to the next, but I'm not sure this is happening. Okay. So the TWAS, abbreviated, the World Academy of Sciences abbreviated as TWAS, has a portfolio of capacity building programs to strengthen science and technologies in the global south. So the emphasis is on developing countries. And as you can see, the third from the bottom includes science diplomacy. So the science diplomacy program at TWAS has been going on for over 10 years, mainly in collaboration with the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and in particular thanks to seed funding provided by Sweden. The focus of the science diplomacy program has been on courses. So it's not conferences or seminars, but it's on training courses and dialogue, training for dialogue. I would like to highlight 4 major learning lessons that could be shared in future activities for the Mediterranean. So firstly, training is done on the youth. This has been mentioned several times. So the young, whether they're researchers or diplomats, are a priority in our courses. In particular, over the past decade, we have devised a mechanism which we call the pairing mechanism, where a scientist and a policymaker, ideally from the same country, apply together and join the course together, train together, and it was mentioned this morning, the importance of trust, of building trust. This dialogue and the experience they have during the course does exactly that. Another aspect of the course has been to train the trainers, because once they return to their countries, they can actually create hubs and incubators for science diplomacy activities. Last but not least is the regional focus, very relevant for the Mediterranean, with specific themes, which I will mention very soon. I would like to highlight once again the mechanism of participant pairs. Okay, this has been very successful, so successful that we've been also documenting impact and building success stories that the scientists and policymakers create when they go back home. So there is an agreement made at the end of the course, agreement which they commit to and take forward to a project, to a dialogue, and to a policy or a process in their own country. So these are examples. The documentation of impact has come up with a huge number of indicators and deliverables, which I don't have time to get into, but I strongly recommend this mechanism for future activities that might be done. So I will skip through this, but I'm happy to share some of this documentation of impact. In terms of concrete proposals, also emerging from meetings that TUAS held with FAO, the Food and Agricultural Association, also a topic that emerged this morning from several speakers, is the energy, climate, water nexus that compromises food security. Again, I'm quoting FAO from the meetings we had with them. They, in particular, also made reference to the Mediterranean, even though at that stage earlier this year, we didn't know that I was going to be here talking and listening to you in a meeting on science diplomacy in the Mediterranean. So there was certainly already at that stage a clear focus. An example of the approach that we discussed with FAO would be to show the pairs I mentioned, data from scientific articles. This may be a little outdated of 10 years ago, but it's still extremely relevant to what is happening in the Mediterranean basin. Therefore, the pairs will be discussing the data and then contextualizing it in their own region and local realities. So food security brings together a lot of things. People mentioned today culture, and actually I had culture, as you see there, and tradition in the presentation. It's something that unites us all because obviously everybody needs food, but there are many future challenges associated with this topic at the moment. Extracting from the conversations that we had with FAO, in a workshop on this particular topic, I would include the idea and strength of local production, small-scale farms, so-called CSA, which means community-supported agriculture, precision agriculture, virtual agriculture, or smart, regenerative agriculture. This is already been done in many contexts and situations. And last, but actually very important, I've been learning the sustainable soil management. There's a whole science around soil that needs to be reassessed and included at the level of the science diplomacy discussion, because obviously policymakers are not as aware as they should be about this. So should we discuss, therefore, from the TUAS perspective, a concrete action for the future? I think focused thematic workshops would be extremely valuable.
It will be for the second round.
Well, I'm sorry. The scientist-policymaker pairing is extremely powerful, very powerful mechanism. Training for concrete action. So documentation of impact shows that the action goes to make a real change. Of course, focusing discussions on urgent issues. And last but not least, in the TUAS experience, the focus here is on three things I didn't mention before. I would like to highlight again, which is youth, young scientists, women. We strive to actually do targeted dissemination to find women to participate, and interdisciplinary collaborations. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. And I think that your presentation shows the difference between the logic, perhaps, of some diplomats like me, that we need introduction, and scientists that goes directly to the solution, no? For the concrete action. I think that we agree that likely diplomacy, science diplomacy will survive, and we need science diplomacy for our future, but I think that we need an effective science diplomacy, and how we can have an effective science diplomacy that brings concrete results on the ground, how to prepare not diplomats but decision makers, scientists, students to use science diplomacy as a tool to tackle present and future challenges. Nowadays we speak about cyber diplomacy, data diplomacy, and decision makers have to deal with a new set of digital policy issues when promoting the interest of their country. Tech diplomacy is becoming a necessity for countries worldwide. Countries need to capture the nexus between technological innovation and economic development. Are we prepared to all of that? And what are the experiences that could we replicate in our region to guarantee that cooperation through science diplomacy will thrive despite the differences in national interests, as Dr. Saliba said in her speech. For responding to this question, I will call firstly Professor Wael Benjaloun to respond to this question, because you are dealing with students and how to prepare students, policy makers to have the ability to work on science diplomacy, and also to have these concrete actions and the experience that we can replicate on our region. Please, Professor.
Thank you. I think students learn early on that there is such a thing as collective bargaining, that we have more weight as students as we move together as a body rather than as individuals. And I think this applies to nations at the same time, is that when there is an opportunity, when there's an opportunity for nations to act together, the specific interests of single nations become, to a degree, I know diplomats are sensitive about this, but the specific interests of single nations become secondary to the common good and the perceived gain that these countries will get from a common position. And I think this is what we tell our students, and we try to get them involved early on in the process. And the most effective way for them to become real players in the system is learning by doing. And again, I come back to our experiences with the climate change meetings. The students did it. In other words, they were guided, they were put in the situation, and they had to lobby themselves. And I think in that manner, they become much more effective, they become much more committed, and they become long-term participants in the process of having these recommendations adopted. And in fact, they got 8 recommendations adopted, either directly or indirectly, during the Marrakesh meeting. So a common position is necessary. Hands-on learning for youth, again, is necessary. But I think fora such as these, fora such as the Union for the Mediterranean on one side, and on the other side, and the European Union for that matter, and on the other side, the university collective bargaining mechanisms, in a sense, the Union for the Mediterranean, other university associations, national university associations. These are all places where students can be mobilized and where collective bargaining, collective action can lead to concrete results.
Thank you, Professor. The same question I will also ask to Professor Najat Aoun Saliba as professor and also as a Lebanese member of parliament. Please, Professor.
I will continue focusing on the most vulnerable population. And I say probably the first thing we need to all think about is to ensure universal accessibility for science. And this means that we need to bridge the digital gap. There are more than 30% of people on the globe that are not connected to internet. And in order for us to speak the same language, these people need to be connected. The second thing that is very important is equitable access to knowledge. And the way we could do this is by adopting and spreading an open data culture. Open science and open data are extremely important, so everyone has access to knowledge. This is something that the science community has started, and I think we need to move in this direction. The third point is basically having evidence-based solutions. And this is possible by developing accessible tools and instruments. I think the science has advanced in providing cheaper instruments so that they are accessible to most people. We have a lot to do in this regard. We really need to advance science so instruments become affordable and they become in the hands of most of the people in order for us to collect evidence. Last but not least, we have to redefine science. Redefining science by actually bridging between schools, communities, and universities. We need to really break the walls between those entities and do the science that matters locally and provide local solutions. This does not mean that we need to isolate people from being connected globally. In the contrary, any local solution will make a big impact globally, and any global advancement will definitely enhance the local solutions. This local-global collaboration is basically at the heart of the advancement of the locals and of the global, so no one is left behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. And for that, I want to say something, not as senior advisor at the UFM, but as Tunisian diplomat. I share with you all what you said, because what is evident for some countries is not so evident for other countries, because we need to bridge the digital gap. We need equitable access to knowledge for the southern countries also. Thank you, Professor. My question will be to Ambassador now, Lourdes. I interrupt you on the first question because I want now to focus with you on Spanish experience that I think that we can replicate on our region, on science diplomacy. If it's possible to share with us some ideas and how we can cooperate through science diplomacy in our Mediterranean region. Please, Ambassador.
Well, first of all, I would like to put the emphasis on the need of sharing information, sharing experience sharing. And for this, I think the UFM offers the best forum to do that, as other speakers already said. And I think the UFM should be reinforced in that respect. On Spanish side, we are more than willing to cooperate with you even further. And I also support the idea put on the table by other speakers on organizing focus thematic seminars It would be interesting to outreach for an increased UFM outreach on what your platform on research and innovation is doing. I know you've been organizing some seminars with UNIMED to disseminate the roadmaps of UFM on research and innovation, and I think it would be interesting to reach out even more to member states so that we can also involve and mobilize our embassies, in the region to all be on the same loop, and share as much information as possible. As a second idea, I would like to stress the need to reinforce networking. Or to do a mapping of scientific associations. I'm not, maybe they exist and I'm not aware. I know of UNESCO and EMED. There are many, on those umbrellas, there are many associations which already exist in our countries. But I'm not aware of a network of association of scientists or scientists individually, as a forum for them to get together and to be able to exchange information, best practice, best experiences, and give them a powerful voice. Scientists in the diaspora, I think, is also an interesting vector. As you may already know, we have been working to support the creation and the development of diaspora Spanish scientists in diaspora. We have now like 23 associations in Europe, in Latin America, in Asia, in the Mediterranean, only in France and Italy have been established. And the Federation of Spanish Scientists Associations in the diaspora are very willing to reach out also to any possible network of associations of the type which may be created in the Mediterranean regions. I understand that not only Spain, but most countries here around the table, we have many scientists in the diaspora, and we think that engaging with them actively is very valuable because not only they get together to exchange experience, but they can also get very active in sharing information, and they play a pivotal role in building bridges among ecosystems from different countries. So this would be another idea that I would put on the table. And as I said before, developing further the intersection among culture and diplomacy, because it goes to the advantage of both fields. And of course, better structuring if I come to the national Spanish good experience that we could share, beside the Advising Council on Science, Technology and Innovation within the Ministry of Research and Innovation that I mentioned before, there is a new initiative which was created in 2021, the so-called Bureau C, Science and Technology Bureau, in the Congress of Deputies. This initiative was created by the Ministry of Science and Innovation, aimed at facilitating a structured dialogue between scientists and parliamentarians. And at national level, I can say that we also co-organize with the Ministry of Research and Innovation annual national science diplomacy days, in which we try to bring together career diplomats to meet with our national research and innovation ecosystem, the ministry and other specialized agencies, in order to all to come together to share experience and to enrich mutually from our own experiences. in that respect, we are co-organizing with the valuable help of the support of the European Commission, as was already stated at the opening session, the first conference to shape the way to pave the way for the European framework on science diplomacy. So these are some experience that I can share so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And under the control of our DSG, Ambassador Al-Bathiti, I think I can say that UFM is more than honored to work with you and with AFID and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Spain on science diplomacy, and also with UNIMED. And I will give sometimes to our colleagues and from France and Italy to reflect also on some concrete actions on how we can work together with them on science diplomacy, and I give the floor to Mr. Max Pauli about the concrete action. If you have something to add, please.
Something that we noticed in our documentation of impact is that often the science policy dialogue is hindered by the lack of socio-economical considerations as part of that discussion. So in the last years, we've been talking to members of the academy who are not scientists, but are economists. And they pointed out to a number of recent publications, economic publications, which include the biosphere and the value of the biosphere in the economic equations. They also pointed out to a new program at UNEP, who is promoting exactly this particular concept. And so, again, from the TWAS perspective and our experience and what we intend to do, I'm sharing it, I would very much recommend including in the science policy discussions of possible science diplomacy workshops, this idea of the socio-economic aspect of any particular theme or urgent issue that is at the center of a conversation. Because without those considerations, you're missing out, and then the policymaker doesn't have a full picture, so presenting solutions to a policymaker needs to have also the social economic aspect, which needs to be adjusted with that consideration of the value of the biosphere.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I totally agree with the necessity of including social and economic aspects to have a large view on our needs. I will give now the floor to Mrs. Alessandra to share with us the proposal from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Italy and the experience on science diplomacy also. Please.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I think I will go straight to the concrete actions we are thinking about. There are possibly two fields. One are the thematic-based actions and the others approach-based actions. For the first ones, I think this, the fields that emerge most frequently are the importance of agri-tech and everything linked to sustainable food production. Second, climate, environment. And third, all the blue skills, including water management, biodiversity for the maritime area. But even more important are the approach-based actions that involve all possible stakeholders. Some are here represented, others are not, and we might consider in the future to include them. So first action is a clear set of priorities, and this is something that diplomats and scientists together can identify with their mutual skills. The second is having science and science diplomacy high in the political agenda, and this is the work of diplomats together with the political stakeholders. This is something we are working very concretely on in Italy. As you probably noticed, I have a kind of disruptive approach because otherwise things don't move on. And in the last months, science diplomacy has been a subject in all bilateral talks at the level of course, Minister of University and Research, but also Minister of Foreign Affairs, Premier, and also President of the Republic. So no matter what the country representatives are met, science is always on the table, because we really want to create bridges and to work together. There are obviously regional and global challenges, and even if there are only 4 points to be talked about, one is related to science diplomacy. Third, investment. And since not always the public authorities have all the financial availability required to tackle the challenges, very important is the partnership, public and private actors. So again, here comes a new stakeholder, which are the economists and the private sector. Fourth, dissemination of awareness for civil society, because civil society plays a key element in tackling challenges. So my wish would be to have representatives of civil societies included in the future somehow, in order to have them on board. And fourth, stimulate interest for science by girls and boys to persuade them from the very early age to be part of the solution. And why did I underline girls? Because for several reasons, girls have not always been encouraged to take interest in science. So this is changing quite quickly, but it would be good to keep encouraging girls to invest their talent in science. Italy launched last year a very nice program, which is called Science, She Says. It's an award we give to 5 women from 5 different regions, so no Italians involved. We are launching the new program for 2024. So if you know very talented women under 40, so they should be under 40 when we deliver the prize, meaning in next April, we would be very glad to get their candidatures through the Italian embassies abroad. So we try to encourage the female contributors to science. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Unfortunately, I have two sons, no daughter. Okay. Thank you for sharing the Italian experience, and to highlight also the necessity of the presence of civil society, and also the young ladies also experience, and the engagement on science diplomacy. Last but not least, I give the floor to Mr. Patrick Nedelec. I know that French Ministry of Foreign Affairs and also the Ministry of Research, Higher Education and Research are doing a lot of things on science diplomacy. Can we share some experience on our region also? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have the strong privilege to finish this session before maybe having 1 or 2 questions. But you asked just before how to have an effective science diplomacy. So, in fact, we had during this short presentation from my colleague from Spain or Italy, excellent project to demonstrate with concrete projects to be efficient in science diplomacy. Meaning that, for example, when we are facing all together during the UFM, we need first to do our homework. Homework means that, for example, just before the summer, our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, actually there is a division which is called the French Interministerial Delegation for the Mediterranean, has organized a huge meeting with all the French stakeholders. And the reason of this meeting was to have a comprehensive view, a French comprehensive view of all our activities that are dealing with Euro-Mediterranean region. And the focus of this meeting was to work on the 3 roadmaps proposed by the UFM, and to answer 2 questions. What problems are we willing to work together? And the second question, what resources to share for these challenges? So we need to do this work at national landscape to be able to bring a voice at UFM and be contributors for the next declaration for concrete and more efficient declaration of the UFM. So the first message, and actually what you mentioned, the conference you organize, has the same spirit, to bring all the knowledge necessary to have a strong voice to bring to the UFM. The second way to tackle the question of efficient science diplomacy is actually to fight against something that we are all fighting, which is an infectious disease, very important and dramatic infectious disease, which is the fake news. We are dealing in a world of media. Media. We are all on media, and sometimes we see more fake news than real news. So to try to tackle as a scientist or as a diplomat, we have to actually promote evidence-based science. We need to promote channel to diffuse this science, and fora such as UFM is appropriate fora to have a voice that is a recognized and true voice for the society of what we are doing. So we need to look at the way we diffuse our informations, and thanks for UFM to be able to help us to diffuse that. To tackle again against fake news, we need also to work more deeply on open science, because open science, it's a way to diffuse also science and to have easy access to science to whole the community, scientists, of course, but also civil society. So we need to diffuse and be more aggressive in terms of diffusion of knowledge. So we have this responsibility to diffuse that. And of course, trying to promote evidence-based science, we need concrete projects to do so. And actually, thanks this morning, the presentation of PRIMA. PRIMA is actually the demonstration of a work all together to promote high-level scientific issue to tackle water, agri-food issue, and that's why France is actually promoting and supporting the development of PRIMA in the future, and even to promote the enlargement of stakeholders for the PRIMA issue. So we need a strong high-level project to promote evidence-based science. And finally, to have and to succeed to have effective science diplomacy, we need to work, and I think it has been mentioned by several of our colleagues today, this morning and this afternoon, we need to work on formation. I'm a scientist. I've been trained in a medical department at McGill University. Why having scientists in a medical department? It's because when you're working in hospitals, you deal with patients. And the patients need 2 things. A doctor to bring diagnosis and treatment. And we need scientists to bring information to the doctors to have the appropriate treatment or the appropriate diagnosis. Actually, for science diplomacy, it's the same thing. We need scientists, we need diplomats, but we need channels to have common training. I think this is something that we should actually try to promote. We have ambassadors or representatives of in this panel of Foreign Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We need to develop formations for scientists and for diplomats as well as civil society. And actually, I'm quite interested right now by the development of actually such initiative proposed by what we know the European University Alliances. Some of these European alliances on their portfolio, they try to develop scientific diplomatic program. This is something that we need to look at all together to see how we could help them to develop this formation, because the more we will work at the beginning with diplomats, with scientists, the same actually reference we will have in the future to promote evidence-based science diplomacy, which we need, clearly we need in the future. So this was actually a short proposition to have efficient science diplomacy for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the trust on UFM, and I think that UFM can be the bridge between diplomats and scientists. We have here at the UFM scientists and diplomats working together, and I think it's a good experience, and we can continue with the support of our members, country members, and also with stakeholders. Thank you again, and I open the floor if there is some question. I know that my colleague Giuseppe is asking to finish, but please, Giuseppe, for some question if it's possible. How much?
5 minutes.
5 minutes? Okay. Okay. Please, if there is some questions. I think that we don't need these 5 minutes. There is no question. Okay, I will summarize a little bit that we agree that there is big challenges, that there is urgent challenges. We need to work together. Working together is not a choice, but I think a destiny in our region. We have a lot of opportunities, and the question is how to work together. We need an inclusive approach, but also we need to work on national level to prepare new generation, and organization like UFM can be, I think, a solution to bridge and to connect between scientists and diplomats. Finally, I thank again the panelists for their time and to be here with us at UFM. Thank you again, and thank you to all the attendees today. Please, Giuseppe.
Thank you very much, Ita. I think a round of applause was very appropriate also for summarizing as science diplomacy, not a choice, a destiny. We are going to take it as face value. I believe that colleagues were also not intervening because they intervened a lot. They sent to us many written comments to the documents that we shared at the beginning of the sessions, and also they intervened a lot during the breakout session. We received very valuable input coming from the rapporteur, and so while you were discussing, we actually worked, Gianmarco was there even without a lot of Wi-Fi, but managing to finalize this document. So very briefly, before we move to the closing remarks, perhaps if Gianmarco can present the major changes that we introduced, which are reflecting your contribution. This is not our contribution.
Okay, thank you very much, Giuseppe, and thanks to everybody who has submitted comments. I know it has been a long time ago already that you saw this document, but we did our best to take the comments on board, and I just want to flag now basically the track changes which you can see. In this first part, very few comments, there was suggestion not just to mention floods and droughts, but also forest fires, of course, is a major extreme event which happens frequently in the Mediterranean. The COVID-19 pandemic inequalities, of course, not just the impact on young people, but also gender-related as well as on ethnic minorities. And then we have these 3 bullet points that reflect the discussions in the parallel sessions. And these ones I'm going to read. The first one is research infrastructures, hard and soft infrastructures, are institutional lighthouses that bring scientists together across borders, ensuring excellence and bringing together North and South while benefiting local communities. Ultimate goal is to open the doors of all research infrastructures to those who can best use them for the welfare of the whole region. For the second session, training and education are key for science diplomacy and should lead to the building of communities of practice. This requires a holistic approach, which is not only based on training programs, curricula, scholarships, and mobility, but also the ethos of the institutions. And the third one, increased channels of exchange between diplomats and researchers, as well as an institutionalizations of scientific advice and mechanisms between scientists, policymakers, and diplomats to address regional challenges. So these would be kind of, say, the 3 bullet points that came out of the parallel session. And if you can please move to the next page. If you just click on the right-hand side there. This one? No? I guess you need a different view from there. Okay. And in the second part, there was actually raised by several colleagues to mention specifically, of course, also the role of social sciences and humanities in science diplomacy. That we can learn from the Mediterranean also for other world regions and apply ideas which we have developed here and transfer them also to other world regions. There was a request to mention PRIMA specifically among the initiatives here, and also international visible events such as MedForum, which can help to convey opportunities offered by science diplomacy. In the part where we talk about, international organizations, member states, networks, expert groups to deploy science diplomacy more structurally and strategically, we emphasize the need for an anticipatory dimension and a policy-oriented approach to leverage the potential of science for identifying peaceful ways to jointly tackle common challenges. And likewise, the importance of providing monitoring mechanisms to identify and measure specific impacts of implemented science diplomacy actions was raised in our discussions. Then in the paragraph we talk about this idea of a Mediterranean science diplomacy hub, just to add what it could be about is to develop novel approaches and exchange best practice. And in the final part where we express our sympathy and solidarity with those affected by the natural disasters which we have seen this year in the region, that we should intensify our science diplomacy efforts to facilitate the use of knowledge and infrastructures in view of mitigating risks and being better prepared. So as I told you at the beginning of the meeting, this is not a declaration. It is non-binding for anybody, so I'm not going to put this to any vote or the like. But of course, it is nice to have some tangible text coming out of this conference, which you can also use for informing the future process. So what I would like to ask at this point, is there anybody in the room that feels uncomfortable with this text reflecting the essence of our discussions? Of course, we can always discuss specific wordings and so on, but I think in general, at least I feel that it is a good text to reflect our deliberations. So if there's any, I just ask if there's anybody who would feel uncomfortable, or do you think it's okay? There was a finger raised. Where's the finger raised? There's one over there, yes, please.
I just to know what do you mean for the ethos of the institution? Because if you write like that for the second, yeah, but the ethos of institution can be misunderstanding. This is only my. That's all.
From the discussion. Yeah. Can I reflect? It was the part of the discussions that we said today. So we said about the mission, vision, and ethos of an institution. So with the ethos, we are referring to the values that should be permeate an organization, all these values that were the center of the discussion today.
That is to say that we share common values, not the ethos of the institute.
It's a term that is used, ethos.
Okay.
But if you want to change it, it's not
No,
an
no,
issue.
no. It's not me to change. I am asking because for me is a little bit misunderstanding, but it's up to the.
If there is no objection to put it in common values,
Can I make a suggestion? As apparently the word ethos triggers a little bit of question how to understand it. Could we perhaps just say, but also the values of the institutions? Would this be? I think it. Okay.
It's the.
Okay, then let's do it this way. This should treat, but also our common values. Is that okay? Good.
Yeah.
Any other point? Yes.
I don't know if I can make some suggestion, as I am not a member, but maybe it would be good to mention MEDEC as a network which is supported by UFM and working on the climate and environmental changes, acting as science policy interface in terms of climate change and environmental changes, I think. But it's up to you. It's the Marwan is the first report in its kind, focusing on climate change and assessing all the knowledge with summary for policy makers, for diplomats, and there is, on the road, other reports and maybe another main report on the Mediterranean, just to synthesize and assess these signs for all, including diplomats. And a small remark is regarding forest fires, which is not directly an extreme weather event, maybe to put forest fire conditions or something like that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, there was a reason why in the initial draft we had not listed any of these networks, because we would end up with a long list, and MEDEC and UNIMED and many others. So, and of course, everybody had the opportunity to suggest changes. So I would rather prefer not to go now into a long shopping list. And there's of course no question that MEDEC is an important network and needs to be involved in all of this. Yeah.
Could we use this platform to widen the scope of science diplomacy to include brain drain?
Of course, brain drain is an important issue for science diplomacy, yes, but again, I would not kind of like to now open the discussion again. You all had the opportunity to suggest track changes, and we are now, of course, already late, and we still have 2 speakers, actually. So I would, yeah, Giuseppe.
Just to mention, we had the process until 2 p.m., which was when we last received the comments. So I guess that since we can always include new inputs, but at certain points we need to have a cutoff, but we will continue working in the other upcoming events, such as tomorrow on topics as such this one. But thank you very much. Of course, we also had to cut many specific names of networks in order to avoid that we get too many shopping lists. We wanted to have a synthetic text which includes the main ideas that we need to push. Of course, this is not precluding the support that we are giving to all the Mediterranean networks, the Union for the Mediterranean, the European Commission, everyone is supporting, such as MEDEC, such as PRIMA, such as SIAM, and so on. But the spirit was to have something synthetic which we can recognize as actions for the future.
Okay, in that case, sorry? Morocco is raising the hand. Yes, please.
Just 2 main points that we discussed in the session of mobility and training. I don't see the creation of the network between the researchers. This is the most point that we want to inscribe in this document. And the second point, to encourage the mobility south-south. It's very important because when we ask about mobility, mobility is south-north, but we want that the mobility south-south also will be inscribed in this document. Thank you.
Again, I would say, of course, there are many issues that have been discussed in this parallel session. And what we are going to do, of course, our rapporteurs have taken notes of all the discussions. So it's not just the one bullet point which you see now on the screen here, but also the other ideas. And of course, we will take these reports and feed them into the process.
Okay, so I guess this concludes. I mean, I see lots of energy coming from the table that shows that the topic is very interesting. Unfortunately, that our time is limited. We are thankful for all of this engagement. And now we finally have the pleasure of going to the concluding remark. It's a pleasure of having with us for the last part, the conclusion, the contribution of the Mediterranean to science diplomacy. We are going to have an intervention by Director Maria Cristina Russo and by Deputy Secretary General Alvaro Albacete. So it is my pleasure to give the floor to the Director for International Cooperation and Global Approach from DG Research and Innovation, the European Commission, Maria Cristina Russo. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Giuseppe, and good afternoon, evening to everybody. Let me first thank Giuseppe and Gianmarco for the great work done. And I keep your words focused and synthetic, and I will follow them in my intervention because it has been a very long day, a very rich day, and a lot has been said. But of course, my gratefulness to the UFM. I would like to thank Mrs. Itaf Ben Abdallah for her excellent moderation, but also for convening the regards of the Secretary General Nasser Kamel. The hazard of life made that he is in Brussels while I'm in Barcelona, but I appreciate a lot the fact that he really opened this conference with a lot of interest. And of course, I'm very, very pleased to be here with Alvaro Albacete, the Deputy Secretary General, who is also very, very supportive of science diplomacy and of the very good cooperation that we have set up since years between the UFM and the European Commission, which led, amongst others, to this conference. Speaking about the cooperation within the framework of the UFM, my greatest thanks to the Secretary General Abdullah Al-Musa from the Higher Council for Science and Technology of Jordan, who is my co-chair for this research and innovation platform that I will have the honor to, we will have the honor to co-chair tomorrow. It's the 29th research and innovation platform, so it's a long time that we are doing that. And of course, I mean, we have developed lots of actions and also boost up our policies, and I will come to that afterwards. Of course, my thanks to all the scientists, the policy makers in research and innovation, the diplomats, the representatives of research and the universities association that are here today. And I think this mixture of participants to this conference made the richness of it. And of course, since I'm thanking, let me indeed thank my team, Ninke, Gianmarco, I mentioned, Ebba and Alessandro, for the great work done together with the UFM colleagues, for organizing this first ever Euromed conference on science diplomacy. And I insist, first ever Euromed conference on science diplomacy. And I think that a lot has been said, so I will not repeat how important is science diplomacy, that we all acknowledge, how complex is science diplomacy, that we all know. What I would like to really say is what the EU is bringing, what we have done, and what we want to do. But of course, let me say that it's not the case that we are organizing this first conference on Euro-Mediterranean science diplomacy here in the UFM, because I think, and we think, that the Mediterranean region, with its complexity, but with its richness, It's really the place where we can develop science diplomacy and where we can bring it then forward to the rest of the world. As I mentioned, I would like I will not repeat the outcome of the discussions. We just had a presentation by Giuseppe and Gianmarco of the outcome document, and which is quite complete, although it is not taking on board different technical issues that we will have the occasion to further develop within the discussions that we have launched today and that we will continue. The European Union has been very supportive on science diplomacy since several years. Let me highlight here that with the previous European Union Research and Innovation Framework Programme, Horizon 2020, seems a while ago, we have launched and supported 3 projects on science diplomacy, and those projects have given birth, if I may say, to the European Science Diplomacy Alliance, which is very important, and it's the first concrete gathering at European level of the science diplomats and scientists putting strengths together to move ahead on science diplomacy. Let me also say that the importance of science diplomacy is clear from the fact that there was an informal competitiveness council, a meeting of the ministers of research, which took place in Spain, which is currently holding the EU Council presidency before summer, a meeting on science diplomacy where all the ministers supported the idea of an ambitious framework for the European science diplomacy. And that took place this year in July, but that builds also on the work that we have already done on science diplomacy, and I thank my dear friend and colleague Patrick Nedelec for having mentioned the global approach to research and innovation, for having mentioned, of course, the Marseille conference that we organized together with the then French presidency of the Council. And in the context of the global approach and the follow-up work, the EU Council of Ministers has agreed on a set of conclusions which fully recognize the importance of science diplomacy as one of the key elements within the global approach to research and innovation. You all know what the global approach is. It's the new strategy for international cooperation in research and innovation that the European Commission adopted in 2021, which was fully supported by the Council and by the European Parliament. The Council of Ministers, in its conclusion, tasked the European Commission to develop, together with the European External Action Service, an agenda for a European science diplomacy, and that's what we are doing together with, of course, the UFM, as this conference showed today, and together with our institutional stakeholders and all the other stakeholders. And for me, what now is important are the next steps. We have listened to different initiatives, to different perspectives, and what is really important is now what we do next. And as I probably has been mentioned by my colleagues, after this conference today, we will launch the call for expressions of interest to participate in dedicated working groups which will be dealing with the different aspects of science diplomacy. So this is a concrete follow-up to the discussions that we had today, and I really encourage the scientists and the diplomats from the member states and from the associated countries to the European Union to be participating in this working group to respond to this call for expressions. And of course, when I mentioned the scientists and diplomats, I mentioned specifically today the ones from the Mediterranean region, because I think it would be very important that in the follow-up work on science diplomacy, in these working groups that will be launched, we do really have the Mediterranean perspective on science diplomacy, since we saw today how important it is. These working groups will prepare the next big institutional event on science diplomacy, which is going to be a high-level conference, which will be organized on the 18th and 19th of December by the Spanish presidency of the European Council, in particular by the Ministry of Science and Innovation and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which again shows the importance of acting together, scientists and diplomats, and of course the European Commission, our services. Within this conference that will take place in December, at the end of the year, and we will have a specific session on science diplomacy in the Mediterranean, and within this session, the outcome of today's discussion will be presented. I understand from my colleagues that the registration website will go online this week. Hence, I invite everybody to register and to participate in this conference. It's going to be an hybrid conference, so you can participate either in person or online. That's important also that you really participate to these events, because I think that what I saw today coming at the end of this discussion, but also what my colleagues told me, is that it's really something that we need to build on, is this convening power that we have in science diplomacy, convening power to bring together scientists and diplomats for having honest exchanges of views between, let's say, what can be two different worlds, and we all agree that these two different worlds need to come closer and to work together towards a common strategic policy agenda. With that, I again would like to thank all of you. I would like really to acknowledge the importance of the Mediterranean region within the science diplomacy context. And I would like to end these remarks with a quote from a famous singer, who unfortunately is not from the Mediterranean region, so I will not name whom he is, saying that if we can make it there, we can make it anywhere. So with that, I would like to thank you for your participation. Thank again my colleagues, and looking forward to continuing our great cooperation and wishing you a very, very nice evening. Thank you very much.
And now it is my pleasure to give the floor to the Deputy Secretary General for Higher Education and Research of the Union for the Mediterranean, Ambassador Alvaro Albacete. The floor is yours.
So thank you, Giuseppe. Director Russo, you have said everything that I wanted to say. So I'm thinking if I should repeat all your speech or just express one idea, even if it is repetitive, which is to share with you how grateful I am, first of all, to the European Commission. It has been, as always, a pleasure to work with you. You have named the persons involved in the preparation of this meeting. It's the case of the members of your team, and I only can echo what you have said. It has been a very productive month of preparation of this conference. So thank you to the European Commission. Thanks also to the Union for the Mediterranean team, starting with Giuseppe Provenzano, who has been behind all the preparation for this conference, and also to the Co-Presidency, our friend Abdallah, and the Jordanian Institute, which has been always very supportive also for the preparation of this conference. So this is the first idea that I wanted to repeat, even if Director Russo has said it before. And the second idea is that even if we are now closing the session, we are not closing the initiative today. So you will be hearing from us, from the Union for the Mediterranean and the European Commission. We will be elaborating on the recommendations and suggestions that you have expressed today in the different panels, and we will be able hopefully, to present it formally in the meeting organized by by the Presidency of Spain of the Council of the European Union in December. And then we will convene workshops with you also in order to see how we operationalize the recommendations and suggestions out of the conference that we have organized today. So those are the two messages that I wanted to share with you: how grateful I am, how proud you should be for your participation in the conference today, because it has been very interactive. And the second idea is that we will be in contact with you in the coming months, and we will also organize follow-up workshops in order to operationalize those recommendations and suggestions. Again, thank you, and with these words, I close formally this session. Thank you.
Voilà.
Voilà.
Thank you.